Thank you to all of you. I'm sorry to not have been with you at the very beginning, and I missed actually the presentation by the mayor, which I was very sorry about missing. But I had another webinar that I was chairing, so sorry about that. I would like to thank all the organizers and our partner, the UCLG, UN Habitat, Metropolis, and SEMAS, for organizing today's learning event, which I think was very, very interesting. The part which I was able to listen to was very interesting. I think it's very timely. It's an important opportunity to exchange experiences of the local and regional governments, to raise their voices, to explore partnerships and new ways of addressing what we're all living in different times of moments in the world, but we're all living. Italy is now a little bit going over. I mean, hopefully we're living in the past, at least the bulk of the epidemic. In other parts, it's growing very, very fast. So what we need is our opportunities like today, where we can exchange our experience, where we can think together, learn from others, and especially because of this unprecedented situation and challenges. And I really appreciated the voices that were brought today, and how you were talking about the need for a transformative agenda, how fundamental the territorial approach is, how central to every one of our responses to this pandemic has to be based on rights, right to food, women's rights, men's rights, and also how we have to come with interconnected approaches. This is an epidemic that after hitting health is now hitting the whole food system. And we cannot approach the food system just with little aspects of it here and there. We need to have an integrated, holistic approach. I heard you several times saying how we need to question our relationship with nature. And indeed, I think we have to build a new relationship with nature after all this pandemic and the massive effects that it is having the world around. But not only that, I also believe that we have to build better relationships between countries. We have to go back to understand what are the real values of solidarity, the importance of having common approaches and not withdrawing within our own different countries to have different approaches from everybody else. And in this pandemic, one of the important issues that is coming out very, very, very clearly is how the world cannot go ahead without a multilateral approach, multi-sectoral approach. So we think from FAO's perspective, we have seen how fundamental within this pandemic, what is the fundamental role that city and local governments are playing. This came out very nicely from all of the different interventions that we were privileged to hear. So thank you for that. From FAO, we recently undertook a survey on urban food systems and COVID-19. So we had 860 responses coming from 77 countries, and 57% of them were members of local governments. We also had responses from academic institutions and non-governmental organizations. So all of the respondents have confirmed that most of the local government responses, so 90% of the responses, have taken at least one measure to ensure access to food for the most vulnerable. So this comes across very, very clearly. And when asked about what are the key milestones for building back better, we had three issues that came out more prominently. One is developing preparedness policy and plans for shock and extreme events. I think this epidemic caught all of us unprepared. So we do need better preparedness plans. Second, promoting local food production and short supply chain and a greater degree of self-sufficiency. This came out very clearly also in the interventions today. And thirdly, promoting inclusivity, ensuring access to food for all. And again, indeed, inclusivity comes out as a fundamental issue. We have seen that this epidemic is thriving on inequality. And unlike other epidemics, like for example, the HIV and AIDS epidemic was actually thriving on gender inequality, this epidemic is thriving on economic inequality. And we're seeing that coming out very, very clearly. So any kind of response needs to address the issue of equality, inequality. And basically, that inequality is part of the structural weakness of our society that is making us more vulnerable to a pandemic like this one. So again, the responses need to make sure that we are looking at how to increase equality. I really enjoyed listening about the different kinds of gender inequalities that were brought up today. That aspect is also fundamental. Societies cannot go ahead and cannot face shocks and epidemics and pandemics when they have such a high degree of inequality and make believe that, it's not that bad or, somehow it's going to go away. We need specific policies to address those inequalities. If not, today we have a pandemic, the next time we'll have another one, and we will still be in the same extremely vulnerable position. So, some of the key actions that have been taken by local governments to improve the functioning of the food systems following the restrictions in mobility and the lockdowns include, according to our survey, and they have come out also today in all of the discussion, establishment of food hubs, promotion of e-commerce, very important, delivery points utilizing public spaces, strengthening coordination with the private sector and non-governmental organization, monitoring food availability and prices in urban markets. And we have examples that came from different parts of the world, like a mobile wholesale market service established in Lima, 8 districts, and also working to monitor market prices in metropolitan Lima. Another example, vegetable seeds that are currently being distributed to families to promote backyard vegetable garden in the Philippines. And in a Colombian location, an ordinance has been issued to monitor food supply and distribution during the emergency. So all of these are immediate responses. And interestingly, none of these have counted with additional funding to carry them out. We know that the high population density of cities makes them particularly vulnerable to COVID-19 impacts. And many of the cities don't have adequate capacity to address the disruptions to the food systems caused by the response to the health emergency. So this has really put to the fore the vulnerability of urban food systems with the associated risks being particularly high for the 1.2 billion people living in the congested and overcrowded informal urban settlements. FAO recognizes that cities and local governments are facing massive difficulties in dealing with emerging threats in food availability and physical and economic access. However, beyond emergencies and crises, FAO is concerned about the sustainability of urban food systems and how to support actions by national and local authorities towards a sustainable path. In our urban food agenda program, FAO intends to raise the profile of cities and local government actions. Their role is essential during shocks and beyond, and will be duly recognized in the upcoming global events that you may have heard of, which is this year, the Nutrition for Growth Summit, and next year, the Food Systems Summit. The FAO framework for the urban agenda, released last year, is our strategy for strengthening food systems in the urbanizing world. It aims at addressing some of the key challenges faced by urban food systems, including the recent food systems disruption caused by the pandemic, by promoting an integrated food systems approach and holistic action. The framework supports the 2030 agenda by building on 4 guiding principles. So, rural-urban synergies. Food system planning needs to take into account the complexity of the rural-urban linkages, recognizing different challenges and influences across geographical locations. This complexity, I think, came out very nicely in several of the interventions today. Second, social inclusion and equity, and of course, leave no one behind, acknowledging the multiple challenges of food access, particularly for the most vulnerable and marginalized groups. Resilience and sustainability, of course, promoting conservation and sustainable use and management of natural resources and ecosystem services, and building resilience to shocks and extreme events like the ones that we are facing, obviously, right now. And finally, food systems interconnections. An integrated perspective matters, recognizing that food systems coexist with multiple systems and that food security and nutrition objectives cannot and should not be addressed in isolation. Local stakeholders are prioritizing different entry points to start integrated food systems in their policy, planning, and action. We have a couple of examples we'd like to share with you of entry points, like urban agriculture and short—
1 minute to wrap up, Marcela.
Very good. Like in the case of some of our projects in Antananarivo, Kigali, Lusaka, and Quito. Food retail environments, market and food outlets, street food vendors in Dar es Salaam and Tunis, and food waste management in Kigali, Nairobi, and Tunis. So I would like to end by mentioning that we really believe that many synergies can be created between FAO's framework and UCLG's 10-point decalogue for the post-COVID-19 era, recently published, especially in 4 areas. So these are proximity models of global consumption and production, worldwide Green Deal, inter-urban system, and next generation multilateralism, very much needed today. Let me just finalize with a key message. Local and regional governments have a big role to play in ensuring sustainable, resilient, and inclusive food systems. Very importantly, the interconnection between the local systems, the local governments, and the national governments is a key interaction that has to be developed and nourished, and FAO is here to help with that. And finally, we believe that solidarity and partnerships are vital to rethink our societies in the wake of the pandemic, to protect our people and our food systems for the future. Thank you so very much for your attention.